This exchange wasn't about immigration talking points. It was about reality versus rhetoric. When Rand Paul sat down across from Keith Ellison, he asked a question that goes to the question, to the heart of the immigration debate. Are local governments actually cooperating with ICEs, or are they quietly refusing and letting chaos follow? Because in Minneapolis, public officials say one thing, law enforcement data suggests another, and the result may be thousands of immigration and customs enforcement agents flooding the state to do a job locals claim they're already doing. Paul presses Ellison repeatedly, would Minneapolis police help ICE arrest a convicted criminal? Ellison says yes. Their witnesses say no. And the contradictions only get sharper from there. Tonight, we're breaking down how this hearing exposed the widening gap between public statements, actual cooperation, and why the truth matters for public safety no matter where you stand on immigration.
Thank you all for your testimony. I think there is a way we can get beyond, our differences on immigration and our differences on approach. And but we have to look at this in a broad scope and try to leave some of that aside. I think there is no justification for bad behavior from law enforcement, whether it's your local police or others. It has to be investigated, it needs to be corrected. You have to change your policies. You have to announce that you're going to do a better job. But I think there is an explanation for why there's 3,000 ICE agents in Minnesota. One explanation has been put forward was vindictive. Maybe, I don't know for sure. But I do know that if you tell people preemptively that your local police will not cooperate, so if ICE calls you up and says to Minneapolis, we have a guy, I'm just presuming it's a guy because more bad people out there, unfortunately, are men than women. It's a guy, this bad guy, we want to pick him up. He's been convicted of an assault and he now needs to be deported. If the policy of Minneapolis is not to cooperate at all, there's going to be a real problem, and then they're going to say we need more ICE agents. So what happens right now, Mr. Ellison, Attorney General Ellison, if I'm from ICE and I call Minneapolis and I say, John Smith is wanted and will you help us? Could we have 10 Minneapolis policemen go with 1 or 2 agents and arrest him? Or do we have to have 12 agents and no Minneapolis police? What happens?
Well, under Minnesota statute 631.50, anybody convicted of a felony who's in custody must be questioned about their nationality.
That's in custody. That's sort of a different question.
Okay.
I'm talking about somebody who's in the community and they need help arresting this person.
Right, but you said felony, so
you're right.
That's what maybe,
that's a different. We'll talk about that. But
yeah.
Let's talk about somebody they want help, and is the local police force going to give them help, or do they have to bring in all ICE agents to do it?
Certainly, targeted enforcement is not the problem, as has been said.
But I think that's what has been said of some of your policies, and the interpretation is that they don't have to and won't cooperate with ICE.
Well, Mr. Chairman, first of all, they're not my policies, just so all the members of the committee know. When you see advice or an advisory opinion coming from the Attorney General's office, this is not my opinion. It is the lawyers in my office's my best analysis of what the law requires. So I say that to you because even if I didn't issue an opinion, the law would still be what it was.
But a month ago, if ICE called the local Minneapolis police and said, we want to arrest this person, will the Minneapolis police help ICE to arrest a person?
I think so, yes.
And now we're at a question of facts.
But see, Mr.
I
Chairman,
think most people are arguing that that's not true and that that's a reason for the surge. If it is true, then the local officials need to say they will. But the mayor of Minneapolis said used crude language to tell them where to go. He didn't say, oh, we're not going to help you arrest 5-year-old boys because we think that's wrong. But if you have a rapist, we'll help you elect rapists, assault people, thieves, drug kingpins, et cetera. But it doesn't sound like that's what's happening to me. Do you really think that it is happening? They're cooperating?
Yes, I do, Senator.
All right.
And let me just, if you'd allow me just to elaborate, I think that what we're dealing with is a difference of what the scenario is. If you're talking about a person who's been convicted of a crime where in targeted enforcement, you will see Minnesota officials make sure that person is addressed properly and deals with their consequences when it comes to immigration.
So Representative Niska, do you think the local police are cooperating if ICE calls them?
No, the public statements of Minneapolis officials have been that Minneapolis police will not assist in enforcing immigration. And perhaps they'll assist if there's some state crime that's alleged. But if ICE were to call in your scenario and say, we need to pick somebody up for violating immigration law, the Minneapolis public statements have been that they won't. And the example we saw just this last week of someone who was arrested with 50 pounds, an illegal immigrant arrested with 50 pounds of meth on January 8th was allowed to go free and had to be taken by ICE last week.
Thank you. Mr. Schnell, I would like to know, and I've watched some of your interviews, so I am impressed with the idea that ICE was saying there was 1,300 people. You reviewed them. Some of these people aren't in Minnesota, never were in Minnesota. Some have been released to ICE themselves, and their list is just flat out wrong. The most impressive thing I heard in one of your interviews was that somebody named Lou Mua was a person that they were, saying this is why we have to break down doors because this terrible person. Sounds like he probably is a terrible person, but you said he was in jail already, and he had a detainer. So I think that truth needs to be explored if that is really happening. There used to be, people said, a direct portal, though. So when you did it or somebody got booked, it went directly to ICE. Does that still exist, or do you have to do them one at a time in prison?
So, Mr. Chair, at present, we provide notification in accordance with law to ICE when they come in. There are systems that are available to people to be able to get that, for ICE to be able to get that. I was told that
Mayorkas stopped the portal, and the portal was a very fast portal, where it was sort of automatically done. True or not true?
It is true that there is a portal that ICE can access.
It was stopped under Mayorkas.
I believe so.
Okay. But you still do your job. You do your detainers in. And so one of the questions goes back to Attorney General Morris's point. So, and look, I'm a stickler for the law. I'm a libertarian on these issues. If detaining somebody who's already served their sentence doesn't make sense to me. But here's my question. If someone is in your prison for 5 years, which some of them are going to be in prison 5 years, they're also wanted and they're at a detainer, which means they haven't had their judgment. Why couldn't we go to immigration court during the 5 years in prison? Does that happen? And why doesn't it happen?
Mr. Chairman, I believe there are some rare instances where we have had people who have had immigration proceedings while they've been in custody and, where removal.
That would answer some of the questions. Then you have a final court judgment. You go through a court. He's going to be represented, and we're going to go through the final judgment. And then Attorney General's problem that, they've not, a detainer's a request, not a conviction. Then they would have had their conviction. It's much easier. But they also, if it's seamlessly working, is it most of the time when you notify ICE, are they showing up on the day they're going to release and it's a peaceful turnover? Or are they doing it half the time, 20% of the time, 100% of the time? How's it working?
Mr. Chairman, I think there has been wide-scale cooperation for a long time. We have had, excellent experiences, and the local staff of the Department of Corrections and the local ICE office are very effective.
Right. Senator Peters.
What happened in this hearing wasn't a shouting match. Was something more revealing than that. Because when Rand Paul questioned Keith Ellison, the issue wasn't ideology. It was whether government officials are being honest about how immigration enforcement actually works on the ground. Paul opened with something unusual for today's Congress. An attempt at common ground. He acknowledged that misconduct by law enforcement must be investigated and corrected. Excuses, no cover-ups. But then he pivoted to the real tension point, the surge of immigration and customs enforcement agents in Minnesota. Why are 1,000 agents suddenly needed in one state? All laid out as scenario critics of non-cooperation policies have raised for years. If local police announce in advance that they won't with ICE, even in targeted cases involving violent criminals, federal agents are forced to act alone. That means more agents, more dramatic arrest, and more chaos. So Paul asked a very specific, very practical question. If ICE calls Minneapolis police and says, we have a convicted violent offender in the community, will you help us arrest him? It actually happens. Ellison's initial answers were careful. He emphasized that advisory opinions from his office are legal interpretations, not personal policy preferences. He stressed that Minnesota law requires certain cooperation when individuals are already in custody. But Paul wasn't talking about people already behind bars. He was talking about arrests in the community. Eventually, Ellison said yes, he believed Minneapolis police would cooperate. That answer should have ended the controversy, but it didn't. Because moments later, other testimony directly contradicted it. Another witness pointed out that Minneapolis officials have made public statements saying local police will not assist in enforcing immigration law. That distinction matters. Helping arrest a dangerous individual versus enforcing immigration violations may sound technical, but in practice, that line determines whether local officers show up or not. Then came the example that rattled the roo, an undocumented individual arrested with 50 pounds of meth who was released locally and later had to be apprehended by ICE. That's when Paul's skepticism sharpened. Do you really think cooperation is happening, or do you just believe it should be happening? Ellison stood firm. He argued that targeted enforcement against people convicted of serious crimes is not the problem, and that Minnesota officials do. In fact, coordinate with ICE under the law. He also challenged ICE's own data, noting that some names on federal lists weren't even in Minnesota or had already been transferred. And this is where the hearing exposed a deeper issue. All sides may be partially local officials may believe they, complying with the law. Federal agents may believe they're being stonewalled. And the public is left trying to figure out which version reflects reality. Notably, didn't T argue for mass detentions or indefinite holds. As a libertarian, he questioned the logic of detaining people beyond their sentences without proper court judgments. Instead, he asked something almost no one talks about. Why aren't immigration proceedings happening during long prison sentences so cases are resolved before release? That question cuts through the politic. If someone is serving 5 years in prison and already has an immigration detainer, why wait until release day when tensions are highest to act? Why not resolve it in court years earlier? Ellison acknowledged that this does happen in rare cases, but not consistently, and that inconsistency may be the real problem driving these conflicts. By the end of the exchange, one thing was clear. This isn't just about ICE. It's about confusion, mixed messaging, and a system where no one fully trusts the other side's claims. When local leaders speak defiantly, federal agencies respond aggressively. And federal agencies exaggerate numbers, states push back. And caught in the middle are communities that just want safety without spectacle. This hearing didn't prove that anyone is lying outright, but it showed how dangerous ambiguity can be when public safety, immigration enforcement, and political posturing collide. Until officials stop talking past each other and start showing receipts cycle isn't ending anytime soon.